Serious attention. I would like to invite Mr. Narendra Nath, Joint Secretary, NSCS, Government of India, onto the stage, please. And Ms. Shobha Jagathpal, Senior Engineer Manager, Walmart Labs. Mr. Britto Sidhan, Cybersecurity Principal Architect, Schneider Electric. And Mr. Samir Ahirrao, Founder and CEO of Ardent Security. Please come onto the stage. Chair. I asked for the chair. Can we have a chair here? You don't need a chair. Okay, great. So, Ms. Shobha is going to moderate the session. This doesn't work?
Not really.
Okay, good.
I think we can get started. Good evening. So I'm very glad that all of you are still here. I know it's the fag end of the day. So we are standing out and counting the number of participants that would be there in the room. So I'm very glad to see some people in the room. Thank you for being here. And I'm sure that this panel discussion is going to give some takeaways that will be useful in your own work. My name is Shobha, and I manage the information security team in Walmart Labs. And I have eminent panel members with me. So when DSAI approached me to talk about supply chain, and that too security at scale, I was wondering, like, this is like black and white, which doesn't go together, right? Security and scale, that is very uncommon to think of. And then security and scale is the vision everyone wants to move towards. So I was very delighted to get the invite, and I would like to thank DSCI to give me the opportunity. And I would also thank my own organization, Walmart Labs, for giving me time to come and speak with all of you. I want to thank each and every participant who are here for listening to us. And with that, we will get started with a small introduction from the panel members. While we do that, I would also request each one of them to let us know what are the challenges that they see with supply chain. So supply chain could not be only with software. It could be in any of the sectors that we can think of, retail, manufacturing, anything that you think of with telecom, or even dealing with governments. So whatever their core areas are, I would request them to give a brief on the challenges that they would face in the supply chain area. So can we start with Britto first? We'll go in episode order. So Britto, over to you.
I guess it works, yeah. So I didn't expect that I'll be the first one. Okay. So myself, Britto. I am working in Schneider Electric. I lead a team of pen testing. And okay, so wondering about what pen test has to do with supply chain, right? So we'll listen to it. And it's part of Product Cybersecurity Center that I represent. I lead a team of group of pen testers. And the question was on the challenge. Okay, I'm not talking about too many challenges. Just I'll pick one of them that I came across or I am familiar about. That's on sorry. Okay, excessive cost cutting from third-party suppliers. So that's one of the challenge that I feel or see in a supply chain. Okay, so it might be unique or different from what others have been, or you might have seen from the supply chain challenges in courses or whatever. So the reason being that I say excessive cost cutting, especially in terms of cybersecurity, not in terms of releasing a feature-rich product by supplier. Overemphasizing cost cutting on cybersecurity will actually kill the supply chain itself. So when I say that the supporting fact is on, let's say, some of the suppliers that we have seen do not emphasize or do not understand the importance of cybersecurity investment in with relation to the sales or the liabilities that they bring in or the reputation that could impact with cutting down the cost on the cybersecurity investment. That also results in this is more seen with the startups, actually, startup suppliers. I'm not blaming them, not everyone. So they cut down on the cost for the cybersecurity investment, which results in our security also getting impacted if we depend on a third-party supplier. So the reason, some of the interviews that we had, not interviews exact, casual talks, just like how we meet outside, right? So we talked to them. So what they normally mention is that it's tough to convince the return of investment on a proactive security that company has to invest. So I do agree that, but it might be, I don't know how they tried to convince or what was their factor in convincing the management and where they failed that I didn't analyze or I didn't ask drill down on the details. But if they do so and the management decides that they cut down on the proactive security, then what happens? They have to spend double or more amount in the reactive security when it comes. Not only that, if a reputation from the startup is lost in this process, it's difficult to gain back in a shorter time. So that's why I would like to emphasize the challenge as on excessive cost cutting by third-party suppliers.
Thank you, Britto. So among the audience, can anyone correctly pronounce the organization Britto works for? Is that correct?
Schneider,
right? That's
I
correct.
would not even attempt it. Okay, so with that, I would like to ask Mr. Narendra Nath to please give a brief intro.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Narendra Nath. I'm currently working as the Joint Secretary to the National Security Council Secretariat. It's based in Delhi. It's part of the Government of India. The National Security Council Secretariat looks after multi-dimensions of the national security, and cyber security is one aspect of it. And in the National Security Council Secretariat, I look after cyber security issues. I've been there since February this year. So I'm quite a recent entrant. Before that, I was in the Department of Telecommunication. I was looking after security as a DDG security assurance there. I was there for 4 years there. I belong to the Indian Telecommunication Service. Okay. Yeah, and now we come to this aspect of challenge. Actually, it's a semester course by itself. You know, so when you talk of supply chain security, it's a semester course by itself. And then we could go on, and then I could spend the rest of the day, today and tomorrow talking about it. But for India specifically, where we don't have manufacturing base as such, we find that a bulk of the systems that come into our organizations, networks, are imported. And like for telecom, where I'm from, more than 90% is imported equipment and goes into the networks. You talk of other sectors also, the power sector, transportation, civil aviation. If you have the air traffic control systems, the bulk of the systems come from abroad. And then it's a serious cause for concern because, one is, there are things like what he has talked about, security by design and all of that. But, if you have systems which on the face of it look good, they perform well, but when we have an adversarial situation, a nation state could, for example, play havoc through its own means or through an agency that, it controls, then we are really worried about it. So that way, how do you secure these supply chains to see that, secure products are there, inducted into the networks is a very serious concern. There are multi-dimensions to the whole thing, including what he talked about, because when you talk of supply chain, it is not the last vendor who was supplied to you, because the vendor himself is actually building up the system based on sourcing from multiple sources. So it's a cause of concern. There are various ways it can be addressed. That's what I'll say. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Samir, over to you.
Hello. How's everyone doing? You want to do some stretches? It's been a long day. Sorry to keep you engaged, but I think we'll make it fun, right? That was my promise to Shobha. Well, I'm Ahirrao. I'm founder and CEO of Ardent Security. I've been in the field. I see some familiar faces, so go back like 20 years back. My last stay was at Lockheed Martin in US. I live in Maryland. So worked there with defense contracting, a lot of government stuff. So kind of makes sense for supply chain. Before that, I was with Deloitte and Symantec and some startups right here in Mumbai. So the biggest challenge I see in supply chain, I think half of us don't know what supply chain security is, right? Originally, when I started to learn, the original terms come from manufacturing sector, right? So it makes a lot more sense that, hey, you're sourcing some product component from place A to place B, but the similar analogy actually applies to software, and we don't realize that, and that's what the biggest challenge is. It's unrealized threat. lot of us or a lot of companies actually don't realize that you can get hacked if your vendor gets hacked. So it's the serious challenge is taking it seriously. How about that? Thank you, and I'm looking forward to the next interesting discussion.
Thank you, Samir. So with that, I just have a small audience pool. So are we able to do the audience pool now? Okay. So in case if it is going to take more than 2 minutes. So while this is getting set up, I want you to open your phones that you have put in mute and try to open a URL and then answer this question. So we are in the data DSCI best practices meet, and one of the best practices when you attend any session is to mute your phone. And looks like even though I did it, it didn't work. So it's a best practice followed, but somewhere something went wrong and my phone kept on beeping. Sorry for that.
Just go to kahoot.it on your browser. Just type kahoot.it. Here, kahoot.it. I think connecting, loading. Meanwhile, I think we can continue the discussion.
Okay, so we'll continue, but before continuing that, let me ask the question myself. I do know how to read English, so I'll take advantage of that. So, which among the following supply chain stages has most security risk? And as you all know by now, I am from the retail domain, so all the options that you see here are mostly related to the retail domain. So the first answer is sorting. Second one is shipping. Third one is stocking. And fourth one is delivering. So I would want, or I would request you to raise your hand if you feel that the most security risk in supply chain is related to sorting. How many of you agree to it? Nobody? Okay, shipping? No risk in shipping? Wow. Okay, and stocking? Even you are part of it? Okay. No? You understand what stocking is, right? Okay. Last one, delivering. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so one of the examples I want to talk about is on one of the e-commerce websites where a customer went and placed an order, and then instead of getting the actual telephone that was ordered, he got a brick delivered. Is anyone aware of it? Where did this happen? No. Any hints? Do you need hint? No way. Yes, you got it right. Okay, so with that we are done with the audience pool. Thanks for your participation, and by this, if you are feeling sleepy, I hope you no longer feel sleepy. We'll move on to the first round, and I have few questions for each of the panel members here. We will start with Britto. So Britto, can you suggest what is needed for a comprehensive review of any of the external or third-party applications or vendors that we want to interact with? And do you really feel it is important we do a review of their infrastructure before we actually start integrated with them, specifically related to software supply chain?
Yeah. Okay. So mix of software and hardware I have to speak about because I come from industry where both these play a key role. hardware supply chain as well as software supply chain. I deal with both of these. And regarding external party, so we have a lot, like when we talk about the external parties, it could be vendor, contractors, service providers as well, whom we interact to get our business done or the product delivered to the final shape. So do we need to assess them, and do we need to have the comprehensive risk assessment plan? Of course, we need to. And in terms of supply chain, we are good in managing our own part we play in the supply chain. So we can manage within our organization, but do we manage all these external or third party? Not directly. Or we might not be having enough time as well for us to conduct an audit at the third party, or maybe, as I said, our core business might be in developing the products or the manufacturing, but we might not be skilled enough to do a risk assessment. So what we normally feel as a checklist, or if I have to list down top 3 or 4, then the primary one would be to have these vendors or third party to have their own risk assessment or the security posture being tested for the product security, as well as a business security process being evaluated by a third party reputed vendor. So when I say third party reputed vendor, we had cases wherein for the supply chain, we had to deliver some components or something that has to be audited. The requirement of course exists there as per compliance as well. We need to have that product certified by a third party. Of course, everyone know the term jugaad, right? We know how to manipulate those clauses as well, finding a loophole. So to get it done, what they do is tie up with their own friends who are running their own startup companies or companies whom they are familiar with. That's why we see that most of the big 4 companies as well getting impacted on their audit or questions come out. I mean, how effective that audit are. So similarly for such companies, they publish you a certificate and say that our product is secure. And what we have done, even though we don't have assessment time for all these products, we picked up some of them and assessed it. We found that certified product came up with a lot of vulnerabilities or issues. So it is more important to get it done through a third-party risk assessment, which you also certify that, yeah, they are trusted by us, and getting them audited. And you should be sharing the score to your customers as well. In our case, we are customers, and we are customers for such requirements. Apart from that, we are suppliers as well. So we also do get audited from the third party, and we are ready to share the score with our potential customers or existing customers too. That's point number 1. And second is about most of these vendors. I mean, in our own company, vendors, third party contractors. So we work in an environment where it's not our own company people that works along with us. So there'll be contractors working with us. So dealing with insider threats, we need to have technology and process that deals with insider threat too. And when we say we did the risk assessment done from a third party on our product security and procedures, it should be regularly monitored, or reassessment for the security score that they have done in the past should be done at a periodic interval as well, from the same, I mean not same, or from the new third party reputed vendors. And finally, strong contractual SLAs are the key points which covers around the security areas. So that's all.
Okay, thank you, Britto. So we heard in the first round that we need to take care of the funding aspects when we deal about the security in supply chain. And now we understand the importance of dealing with vendors or third parties or external people who can give us the supplies, or we may have to use their services to accomplish our own business needs. So Narendranath sir, how is the security guidelines that is coming from our various policies that are at the nationwide or within various sectors helping the security in the supply chain domain?
Yeah, I mean, this, as I pointed out, this has been a concern for quite some time. So some of the industries, in the morning session, I had one, and we're talking of critical information infrastructure. Some of the industries, are mature in the IT domain, and others, don't have that level of maturity. 2 of the verticals are, one is this banking financial sector, which has been using IT infrastructure for a pretty long time, and the other is the telecom sector, where, they are purely at this thing. From my own, background in telecom, I can tell you that recognizing that a lot of equipment comes from other places, and the service provisioning is through the licensing regime that is there. Anybody who wants to provide this telecom service, he comes through a licensing regime. So there are license conditions that have been put. And one of the conditions is that any equipment that goes into the networks has to be security certified before it gets into the network, and the security certification has to be maintained. And during an audit process, they would look at that certification. So that is one way of going it. And the second condition that is there in the license in India, for example, is that they should maintain a record of the supply chain. So whatever equipment is coming, the record is to be maintained. So this is one part. And the third that they have done is that if any breach does occur, security breach, there are penalties that are there. For each breach, there is a penalty of 50 crore rupees. So people are, that actually helps them to, see that they follow the guidelines that are there. So this way, it's sought to be addressed. But, there are challenges in this. So when you talk of security certification, it could be certified anywhere. Do we have a clear cut, like in the telecom sector, for example, when the design, secure by design is something you talked about, that concept was not there. So when you talked of the second generation and third generation mobile communication equipment that was coming, the standards body, the 3GP, was actually preparing, they were actually focused on the functional specifications. They didn't have the security. It's only when sometime in 2014 that you have what's called a CCAM group that was formed, and then they started looking at security as an aspect, and that standards were coming. So when you talk of security certification, how do you certify? What against what do you certify? So whether you have the standards. So that is one area that's a challenge there. With the current 5G and all, so we have the security standards that are coming about, and they're able to do it. So these are problems. So it's regulations and guidelines. In the morning I was also talking, the British in the UK, they have come up around 2 or 3 days back, I think day before yesterday, they came up with the supply chain vulnerabilities in the telecoms. So there also, they have raised these issues. And one of the things they talked about is the security practices that the vendors follow. And how to enforce that. Do you go through the operators and then enforce it, or you go directly to the vendors and enforce it? In India, for example, we have traditionally gone through the operators and then told them that if there is a breach, you're going to be penalized. So then on the back to back, then they put those conditions on the vendors to see that they get the things done. In September of 2017, in India, we have come up with a certification regime. So that says that any equipment that is to be sold in the country now, it is not the operator. Any equipment that is somebody called that could be used in a telecom network would have to be certified. So now, it becomes incumbent on a vendor that he can't sell unless he had it certified, security certified. So that is something, so now we are actually coming onto the vendor to see that, you get it certified. So that is one. And of course, as I said, there is common criteria, certification is there. So if you want to really secure the supply chain and through a security testing mechanism, you have the common criteria, but there are a lot of lacuna in that, because the common criteria is based mostly on a vendor claim, and you're verifying against that claim. And a vendor could claim something, and another vendor would claim something, both would get certified, but the one doesn't mean that one is better than the other, because your claim would be something low. And it also talks of, assurance levels of EAL 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. So just because somebody is certified to EAL 7 does not mean he's better than one who's certified to EAL 2, because this person could have a better security posture, but not having an assurance level of testing to that level. So, there are some problems there. So it's challenges. So regulatory wise, if you say that's what you had talked about, and it's an evolving thing that's happening across the world, especially after the last 1.5 years and something, all of this, what the Trump administration has taken up and all of that. So you'll find that even in the other countries, there's an evolution that's taking place in the supply chain. Yeah, it's an evolving space, a challenge, and I think you will find lots of evolution happening now.
Thank you, sir. I think sometimes it's very important to leave a fine if you don't follow rules. And if you don't follow traffic rules, at least in India, you got to pay 5,000 rupees. That's a good rule. So I hope that even with various regulations that are coming, if there are deviations out of it, if everyone is made to pay huge fine, that is going to set their mindset in the right direction, and they take care of doing things right. So Samir, having your own startup.
just to finish off,
Yeah.
this is I talked to this is not there in all the other sectors. I think the other sectors also to evaluate and get to some sort of a enforcement mechanism to see that it happens. I'm talking from a national security perspective.
Yeah.
Individual companies have their own to see that business continuity is a problem, brand erosion is a problem. So they would definitely take measures. But where national security comes into place, there are sometimes that you'll have to do an oversight, in addition to the measures they themselves take.
Yep, true. So Samir, you have your own startup and you know the importance of technology and innovation. So can you briefly talk about how are these going to help to address some of the security in supply chain?
Yeah, so if you see, I mean, anything like security, right? I mean, it's extra cost, extra effort for everyone. So putting additional measures for everything definitely takes time in security, no doubt about that. But I would say there is a lot of awareness. Last RSA conference I went to, right? We had like 25 to 50 vendors actually popped up. So that's a good sign, right? So people are actually looking towards that, hey, this may be a risk we need to worry about, at least in the BFSI sector, I think banking sector, because, so I think very first thing is understanding who your vendors are. That's actually very first thing. Inventory, right? Just like you need to have vendor inventory and a lot of actually tools doing that. That's definitely a good practice. Other thing is, I think, every security aspect in supply chain, because supply chain is all about connecting dots, right? So it's not about security of one component. So no matter how secure you are, but if your vendor is vulnerable, you are vulnerable. I think that's the whole perspective actually the supply chain security brings into the picture here. So are you actually testing those connecting dots? Very simple example is API, right? You're exposing whole bunch of API and you see the Cambridge Analytica, the Facebook. I mean, in one way you see, it's basically supply chain. They could not understand, basically somebody is exploiting the Facebook API to mine data, what they are not supposed to. So I think it's all about different third parties or your vendors. Very simple example everybody is going through is like vendors, right? Cloud supplier or your Amazon, AWS. It's nothing but your third party vendor. If you see, it's part of the supply chain. So what are you putting out there? I mean, you just Google AWS bucket hacks, and last year, I think last time I searched, like there were 20 people just accidentally kept their S3 buckets open, right? So again, cloud infrastructure, but still it's a third party supplier. You don't have control over it, and you need to manage in a very effective way. So I think number one is you need to inventory your vendors. Number two, you need to set certain minimum standards. And I think standards are coming up in supply chain security. You need to look at that. And then other things would be you routing the right vendors to actually audit, both on the technical and procedural side. I would say those are the three things if you can start your supply chain security with. That would be really great.
Thank you, Samir. So I don't have to summarize what he talked about. He summarized it himself.
I'd like to add, yeah.
Sure.
One of the things that he has pointed out is, these are some things. One is, do you have visibility into your vendor? And then, the trusted vendors. So whether you empanel some trusted vendors, so that, or because you want to have a long-term relationship with them, you can invest in that vendor, go and see what are the procedures they're following. And then maybe, have some people go in once in a way to see that, those procedures are being followed or not. So that is one way of doing it. So that's very important. And the other thing, he had also pointed out regarding third-party, vendors not investing sufficiently in security, just to get you a good price. Now, that's some sort of a cheating in the sense that it's not a level playing field. You have another customer, another vendor who gives you a good product when he is invested into security, because the pricing is more. So that is something you'll have to look at, and about this, how to ensure that you have to then define what's the security measures that you want in the product, so that you have a level playing field for that thing to come in. So that's important. There are other things that one of the things that I wanted to mention is regarding one is, especially in the ICT supply chain, is the supply chain doesn't stop after the equipment comes to you because of these updates and upgrades that happen. So how do you ensure that you have security? Once you've ensured security, you've got a good product, you put it into it. The next day you have an update that's coming in it. And then what is the mechanism you have to take into the update and upgrade? That is one part. And the other part that comes in is regarding this, service management. Because lots of time you're vendor dependent for maintenance of the equipment. And for that you have to give him access. And it could be a remote access that he would come in. So how do you manage the remote access? So these are, difficult questions in a supply chain. And one of the ways that has been addressed is to have a remote access server, and through that, all remote access happens. And you also say the IP addresses in advance. We say that these are the IP addresses from where the remote access would happen for maintenance activities. And whatever commands are given, we have a list of commands. Only those commands can be played, and that is also whitelisted. And after that, the third thing that happens is that all those listed commands go through a remote access server, so that we have a log that's maintained, and you get a window in which those commands are executed. So these are some things, measures that are part of regulations in our country also to manage that supply chain. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir. So that's a lot of information, and then I'm sure that that actually revealed by itself on how much experience he has got in working with telecom and government, and specifically in helping us to have the ways in which the security challenges can be addressed. So with that, we have the second audience pool. So can you please help me with that? So this is open, and I hope...
All you joined? Have you all you are joined? Is it working? Can you
So are we getting live results somewhere?
Yes, it'll come here itself.
Okay, so I'll start.
Do you want to take it?
Okay. So you choose the respective icon. Which among the following supply chain sales has most security risk? You choose the particular specific icon against the right option.
Is it triangle, circle, diamond, square? Come on, it's for you as well. It's open. It'll get you out of sleep. No? $16 answers so far? I think this is the first question.
So we
Okay, we're redoing it. Okay. This is done. Can we move on to the second one? Yeah.
second question.
Okay. Sorry. I was standing in middle of you and the screen. So, supplier? Middleman. Consumer? Consumer. Customer. Always number one. Who? Okay. So we'll go to the third one. Misconfiguration of cloud access. They can't see the answers. Is it possible to move it a bit up? Trusting third-party vendor. Okay.
It's fine.
Didn't realize I was blocking it.
How much time do we have? We are almost done. Okay. Okay. Done?
So what's the
Trusting third-party vendor? What's the right answer? Inventory. My boss is telling inventory, so I'll go with inventory. Always listen to your boss. Yes. Now? You can always say it depends, but for this question, I'll go with my answer that my boss gave.
If you say trusting third party, I think that you are challenging the objective of supply chain.
So there's a lot of inventory that come in and you need to manage it, right?
Almost
You're coming to the end of this panel discussion. I hope we didn't put any of you to sleep and we made it as interactive as possible. Are there any questions for the panel? We had all 3 questions. Yes. Any questions? No.
Can I ask one question?
Please explain his answer. You gotta explain your answer. I explained mine.
Which one, the inventory theft?
Yeah. Why inventory versus third parties?
Can you put the question back?
Yeah.
Where is
No, it depends on, it's like a company like Amazon which deals with products. Company like Amazon which deal with products, then you look at the supply chain for that, they're looking at inventory because they're dealing with inventory and a loss of inventory is something. But a company like a power sector, which is actually not, or a banking sector, which is looking at supply chain for, IT infrastructure that's coming into it. And we are looking at IT infrastructure, supply chain security. For them, that is the third party thing is the most important because the third party thing is going to result in a lot of money loss for them. They lose a few computers, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't, because the cost of operations, the cost of that equipment that comes in is very small part of the complete cost of operations. So I think that's what you mean. I'm speaking for you.
No, so the thing I said, I think that inventory theft, I'm sorry to disagree with that though. Inventory theft is last of my concern because I'm a security guy, right? Okay, I lose some inventory here and there, that's fine. The merger and acquisition is big one, right? And another one, what Mr. Nath said, third one, that was trusted, whatever that third party, that's also, we are talking about, I think, more from the security concern side of. So merger and acquisition, the Marriott Bridge, Starwood, right? The bridge started in 2013. They actually merged the company or made acquisition, Starwood, in 14. They didn't do due diligence. And they were being hacked for last 5 years, lost 500 million consumers' data. So that is also a big concern. The only reason I was saying everything has its perspective, so I can't pick one versus another. But yes, I think the trusting third party and evaluation is the biggest concern, I would say.
If I lose a PC, if I lose some equipment, it's not a big loss for me. But
True.
if equipment lands with me and lands with the malware, it's a bigger problem.
Yes.
I totally agree with your
Yeah.
explanation. I think what you're meaning is just a matter of perspective, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I don't have a large reliance on third party, when I look at the 4 things, it's not going to be the most valuable to me.
Yeah.
But when I look at inventory and I'm carrying a bunch of inventory because I have the stores and stuff in the back room, to me that's where the value is. But you're right, and I don't think there's any
Right
especially
answer
when it
there.
comes to supply chain, there's not really any standard answers. You have
Yeah,
to
you
look at
don't.
where you are, what you're dealing with. I
Yes.
mean, it could be somebody's just going to come steal the stuff out of the PC.
Yes.
That may be your biggest input,
Yes.
So, I get it. It's good dialogue. I had fun. You said we had fun. I had fun.
But if I have to relate the other answers as well, like inventory theft. What if the inventory is, the supply chain management storage, software and data storage happens in the cloud? Then the second answer would be more like misconfiguration of cloud access.
Not if I'm in my
Yeah.
Not if I'm
Yeah.
in my cloud.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a third party. Then it's on me.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the perspective comes
Yeah.
from, right?
And most, I think, recently that more adoption is on the cloud. The supply chain management and software and data storage happens over the cloud these days, or that's being more encouraged, cloud adoption. So that goes over there.
I agree 100%. And Shobha just gave me the look to shut up, so.
Hey, anybody has any questions? I know we are running late.
So just one question, as no one asking, so I'll ask one question. So just two things, right? We were talking about the inventory. On that similar point I want to touch upon. This is very true when we talk about the supply chain of product. But as sir mentioned, what about the supply chain of services? Or how do we protect, for example, India is a destination for IT, ITS, right? So we have been seeing the recent breaches. What about the security of, supply chain of services? That's one. And second, I think we spoke about the supply chain of third parties. But I think if you see recent attacks in retail or maybe financial institutions, it's a problem with not immediate third party. It's a problem with the nth relationships. Because when you go to the any telecom operator, X is taking any service or product from the Y, and Y is somehow depend on some component on Z. Z is dependent on some other components. I think it's a chain of relationships, and I think there is So my question is that how to counter this particular nth relationships? That's very critical to answer.
Thank you for the short, long question.
No, I think so. It has answer in itself. I think industry has done good job, especially all our service companies in basically India-based service companies. They're pretty good at ISO 27001, right? There is a specific standard for supply chain security. I don't have number top of my head, but the certification. Then you had the SAS 17. Now they are called SSA 16. Or they may have changed name one more time. So there are a lot of the standards. I think now how effective that is, so they need to particularly focus on supply chain controls. But they do have a particular clause that what your sub-vendor standard should be, minimum, right, in terms of, and it's a big problem because you are sub to sub to sub to sub, right? So it's a big chain, but I think you can limit that you can only have these levels, maybe. I think that's a big plus. And if you have any corporate policy, you can set the vendor minimum standards that, hey, I have to have whatever character password, I mean, the simple, maybe two-factor, I don't know. I think those days gonna come where you actually tell your vendor exactly what to do for putting your security. So I think it's a pretty good start, and it's more from the business side, because more confident your service providers or basically your customers are, more certification you have. So they work in, well, but panel, please. If you have any more.
I think we will.
I just
can
add
we
up
stop?
one line because
Okay.
the
We will
way
give
that
you
we
a
tell
minute.
our supplier is
Okay.
that the way that we ask them to ensure that they are getting audited by a third party, they should ensure their supplier and further. That of course takes the support of ISO 27001. If they are certified on that, that ensures that as well.
Thank
One of
you.
the things is, you had raised, this is one good thing that will happen. But I know, I mean, thinking loud that we have this static and dynamic testing of codes. If that could be done, maybe some of the bad practices or using old software, or all of those guys, I don't know if they could be checked up. I mean, that is one way of checking your, I mean, after it comes through the supply chain.
Okay, so with that we would stop. I would like to thank each of my panel members. I think they are so enthusiastic that they would want to continue to share their experiences. And then I would want to thank each of the participants in this panel discussion. Without you, I think we would have not had the fun in hosting it for you. Thank you all.
So we have our next session at 5 in ballroom, and it's a plenary session on firefighting the payment frauds.